Hello friends and welcome to Figure Study, where today we are getting a little bit morally dubious with the Botcon Dread Pirate Crew, or as most people think of them as I first knew of them, Pounce and Wingspan. Obviously based on, well, I say obviously, but I'm not really one to talk because generally speaking I'm not super versed in the history of the characters or the toys, but they are based on Pounce and Wingspan, the Decepticon twins. I forget what their actual name was, but they were twins, and as weird and stupid as their gimmick was, I actually thought it was kind of cool. You had two practically identical robot modes that would turn into very different alt modes, with Pounce turning into some kind of panther thing or large cat of some kind, and Wingspan turning into some kind of bird of prey. Obviously, these modes are not mirror images of each other, but still, I think this is cool. And also, it's derived from my absolute favorite figure mold in the entirety of Transformers Prime. So, win-win, I guess? And yeah, I don't know anything about the history here. I did actually get these with the instructions and the bio cards. I just have not bothered to read them. But it's basically Pounce and Wingspan, and oh, wow, do they look amazing. I mean, as I've already said, like right from the get-go, this is like my favorite of all time Transformers Prime figure mold. I love the RID Viacon. It's such an ingenious design. It looks great, and the transformation's really cool. And these guys are that, basically, with Wingspan being based on the aerial Viacon or flying Viacon or whatever the terminology was for this guy, but it's basically the same mold. The only real difference between the two, aside from like the general shape of some of the molding bits, is he's got wings that flip around, and he has like a little spoiler on the back of the car that flips out, whereas this one does not have a spoiler, but it has wings. So other than that, pretty much the same, which is a really good fit for Pounce and Wingspan, I feel. Yeah, they're not identical, but they're very, very similar. But I also like how you can kind of get an idea of who's who by just looking at the silhouette, basically, because Wingspan's got a literal wingspan. But as I was saying, these figures look incredible, not just because of the molding, but I love the coloring here. And I know it's based off of the G1 figures, where they had that kind of like white and purple and very turquoise kind of chests going on. And then the alt mode bits, in Pounce's case, the legs and tail for his cat mode, and Wingspan's, I believe, feet, but definitely his wings were kind of a more purpley color. And granted, yes, Pounce does not have the purpley, reddish, whatever you want to call it, color on him anywhere, because he doesn't have legs or a tail, but the color scheme here still works, and it looks so good. It's kind of garish, but in a way that looks amazing. The hues they match up really, really well. They complement each other wonderfully. And normally I'm against the idea of having like one solid color in one spot and not carrying that through elsewhere, but here it totally works. This entire chest section being this kind of bright turquoise, it just works, and it, again, complements so well. The color blending is great too, because the contrast between the shades are fantastic. Like, the purple is dark enough that it pops against, or no, I shouldn't say the purple pops, but like the lighter colors pop against the purple because it's dark enough. But you don't really have a lot of white and light blue turquoisey overlaps, so you've got these really clear, defined spots where it goes from like light to dark to light to dark to, you know. There's not a lot of paint on the robot modes, with some exceptions, obviously. Like the shins that have that little bit of the purple, and then this really nice silver and yellow detailing in there. And it's the exact same kind of detailing on Pounce. And it does look good, and it adds just a little bit. But I don't necessarily think that it was needed. I was actually kind of debating when I first had these guys in the mail about whether or not I was going to want to do any kind of detailing in the chest and torso section, because, let's be real here, it's kind of a big unpainted chunk of plastic. Like, the purple in the chest is a separate piece of plastic, because that's where the translucent piece for the regular Viacon figure is. And it does look a little bit blank, but actually having them in hand, I think it actually works really, really well. Because, yeah, it's not painted, but it contrasts really nicely with everything else. You do have a little bit of paint in the legs there. And the way that this tone works, especially, as I said, in person, it actually shows off a lot of the details really nicely. Like, you don't have to do anything. The light just hits it and it shows off all these little creases and lines and patterns in the torso. All right, so let's get Wingspan out of the way here, and we can take a look at Pounce up close. And I mean, it's the Prime Viacon, just different colors, but it works. I really like the detailing they did in here, as I said, with the shins and the feet there. Nothing on the actual toes is painted, but as I already said, I don't really mind the overall lack of paint in bot mode because it all pops so hard against everything. It's kind of amazing how well it works. And given the history of these guys, I mean, the original characters, I don't think it bothers me either because, I don't know, the color scheme just lends itself. It's like the color scheme is the thing. Once again, like, great molding. I love the kind of jaggedy lines, the symmetrical jaggedy lines on the Viacon torso that come in and then are sort of not quite mirrored, but almost like it's self-homaging itself in two different places. It's a cool design. And it's got this kind of interesting, slightly off kind of slope to it that also works really well. And it's like a little bit thin in there, but like it works because he's got the thin arms. So having the thinner torso, I think, kind of makes it all work a little bit better. In a way, I almost wouldn't mind if the thighs were a little bit thinner. And of course, he's got car chunks hanging off of him, but they're very few car chunks, and they all work really well. And there's practically no kibble. It's just this little flap on the back. And that's it. Even the back looks kind of cool with the patterning here, minus the stamp there. It still amazes me how this figure works. Just the engineering on the Prime Viacon is fantastic. And the head is the Viacon head. It's this strange, kind of obviously bad guy, not necessarily intimidating, but kind of spiky look. And it works really well in just plain white with the yellow visor. Bringing in Wingspan here, you can see that the overall detailing is identical. Like the legs, the torso, the head, it is all identical. It's just the shoulders, forearms, and leg kibble, and also obviously the wings, but we'll get to the wings in a second, that are different just because it's derived from the same, I don't want to say mold, but it's the same skeleton. It's the same skeleton, and it works. The forearms for this guy, for Wingspan, and by extension, the flying Viacon, again, don't remember the exact name of that figure. These, I feel like they work a little bit better for the robot mode because they are a little bit thicker. I mean, I was saying, you know, the thinness doesn't necessarily bother me, but these are rather thin, and it's got like very, very slight molded forearms in there. Whereas with Wingspan, there's just more substance to them, and I think that works in its favor. Also dig the slightly spikier shoulders that no longer have wheels, because what does he need wheels for if he flies, but still works. And as I said, these are a little bit different. They don't really change much in terms of the silhouette. They come down further and go up a little bit further, so they kind of take up a little bit more real estate, visual real estate, when looking at the legs, but I think it works just fine. The head is exactly the same as Pounce and the Prime Viacon, like exactly the same. No different molding, no different paint, but it works because they're supposed to be twins. And I didn't point it out on Pounce, but they both have the little pirate crest there, which I think looks really cool. I like how it's a sort of adaptation of the Decepticon logo. And then, of course, he has his glorious wings, which you can angle back a little bit, or a lot, if you want them to kind of not be a part of his overall silhouette, which does make him look a little bit closer to his brother. Like they're still not identical. They're not indistinguishable. They definitely have some different design cues, but with the wings tucked away, a lot less stands out. But the problem I have with tucking the wings away is if you do that, you get a fair bit of stuff coming off the back. So, yeah. And because they're not identical to begin with, I really don't mind fanning the wings out. I think it just helps him to stand out a bit more, but you can still see when you put them side by side just how similar they are. And it looks fantastic. And as I already said, I love the coloring on the wings, and I also like the fact that they did they painted just these little white accents on the edges there. I wouldn't say they're absolutely necessary in terms of breaking up the color and stuff like that, but they're definitely nice, and I like how it just helps. I feel like if this was a solid piece of purpley, metallic-y, reddish plastic, it still would have been okay, but that little bit of white definitely helps. All right, anyway, let's get these two back here so we can do size comparisons, and I'm going to keep them both in the shot this time, just because. So here they are with a sort of standard height deluxe, and you can see they are definitely deluxe height. They come off a bit thinner, but in my mind, that's actually to their benefit because it helps them to kind of stand out a bit more in the general scheme of things compared to other transforming robot humanoid characters in other lines. I mean, granted, Downshift is quite blocky, but it's a good look. And also, try to keep in mind these similar heights when we get to the vehicle modes, because that's another thing that actually really impresses me with this mold. But anyway, let's move them up a little bit more. Probably didn't need to move them back as far as I did for the size comparison in the first place, but whatever. Here they are with their progenitor, the original RID Viacon mold. I know it's not the original because there's the first edition, but I like this one a lot better than the first edition. But while the frame is definitely the same, and again, it's these two figures, mechanically, molding-wise, are identical. There's nothing separating the two of them in terms of how they are structured. Differences, obviously, are the same between these two, but the coloration makes such a difference. And wouldn't you know it, I up and forgot to do a size comparison with this thing in robot mode. I don't know why I keep forgetting to pull this thing out, but here you can see Pounce and Wingspan with the duck tank. Alright, so with the size comparisons out of the way, let's go ahead and do the transformation. I'm just going to do the transformation for Wingspan because the transformation on both of them is practically the same. I've already done the transformation for the regular Prime Viacon previously, and this guy's a little bit different because he's got those wings, so I kind of wanted to show him off instead. Oh, also, before I forget to mention, the one thing that kind of bugs me with Wingspan as opposed to Pounce is his torso is white in the back for some reason, whereas Pounce is it's solid all the way around. I don't really understand why they felt the need to do that, but it's okay. Anyway. So here we have the twins in their vehicle modes, and yes. This looks so fantastic. I love this so much. This is why I opted to start in the robot mode instead of vehicle mode for these guys, because I love what they did with the deco on these vehicles. They look so great. Here they definitely stand apart more, but they still do look similar. You could almost vaguely see this car hiding inside of this, but they do definitely stand out, and the coloring, the detailing is so awesome. So getting Pounce out of the way real quick so we can start with Wingspan. It's a flying car in that it's a car that has wings instead of wheels, and it just looks so great. The coloration here is just as great as it was in the robot mode. It's just that instead of having sort of a turquoisey blue centerpiece, It's primarily white with a little bit of the purpley red for the wings, and then like accents in the other colors, like that turquoise here, and a little bit of that purple. So it still brings all the colors out, but it definitely balances them a lot differently. And the shape of this thing is interesting. It almost makes me think like if you took the wings off of this thing, it could almost work as like some kind of villainous, over-designed, overpriced car from The Fifth Element, because a lot of the vehicles in that just kind of gave me this kind of vibe. And the paint detailing is nice. Would have been nice if they put the little Pirate Crew logo on the front there, but they didn't really have to, because you've got the giant version of it right on the back there, and that looks really, really good. The panels are not quite lined up perfectly, but it's okay. It might be a bit too much to ask to expect them to have it like symmetrically lined up perfectly for something that splits down the middle like this. And it's only slightly off. It's not a huge deal. The reason why I like these vehicle modes the most out of the robot modes, over the robot modes rather, is because of these accents. And this is where it seems most of the paint went. Because on Wingspan here, you've got, again, the white on the wings there. You've got that enormous pirate logo on the back, which is fantastic. And then you've got all of this interesting painted detail along the side, like the black and turquoise, which looks great side by side. That purpley color there on the underneath. And then you've got this kind of jaggedy 1990s Trapper Keeper, we're just doing it to look radical kind of turquoise and black jagged design there. Very, very large headlights that I actually rather like the shape of. And the turquoise stripe down the front, the purple windows that carry over that color from the robot mode. It looks fantastic. And I also love how they outlined this stripe detail on the hood in black. It really helps it to stand out. And I mean, I can kind of see why they would do it, because that turquoise on the white would probably get lost a little bit. And that's also probably why they added the black lines on the underside here and also on the fin here to just kind of help make it pop a little bit more, I think. So getting Wingspan out of the way and bringing in Pounce, it's kind of the same deal where you've got the similar distribution of colors. You've got the purple windows that cover that purple that was in robot mode. You've got the yellow bits that I guess it's sort of like what was in the shins, and the turquoise and black. All this cool patterning that just fits with the aesthetic here. It's great. And even a little bit of that, not quite the same color. Like it's a little bit darker, but a little bit of that kind of purpley color in Pounce's wheels, which, yeah, they were there in the robot mode, but you don't really see them. Like, from the side a little bit, but, the predominant feature of Pounce is more that chest. The predominant feature of Wingspan is totally the wings, so, yeah, you don't really notice that too much. But, again, all the colors are here and represented, and I love the patterning and detailing on Pounce here. With the turquoise and black on the edges of the spoiler. That's fantastic. If you're looking at it from the side, it makes sure that there's always something interesting going on color-wise throughout the entire length of the car. And you've also got the lines along the door there, which are similar to, but at the same time, not the same as Wingspans. And the headlights, which are nice, but I also really like how they did the yellow for the sort of lower lights here, and this little added molded in, I don't know what that is. It's some kind of swish detail. I don't know if that's supposed to be the light and they're trying to make it look like it's extended further or what, but I like how that kind of cuts into the white there. The front is also fantastic. The giant pirate logo on the hood, love that. The turquoise and black along the sides of that thing popping out of the hood, also great. And yeah, you got the blank spot for the pirate logo that could have gone there, but with the giant pirate logo right there, it makes that seem less important. Weirdly enough, I think one of my favorite features on this vehicle mode design is these little bits on the front here. Just, I don't know, I like the kind of dotted texturing going on in the turquoise there with that nice solid black outline. It's such a great look for this car. It's a pretty great look for this too, but I really of the two, I think the car mode for Pounce is my preferred vehicle mode. I think they both look great, and the coloration on both is fantastic, but there's something about the shape of this car that just always appeals to me. Speaking of, let me get Wingspan off to the side here so we can bring in the RID Prime Viacon and can get a closer look at the two of these side by side. And again, they're the same exact shape. They're the same car, but the coloration on the two is so drastically different. It really helps them to stand apart. Granted, yes, there are repro labels all over the Viacon here, so some of the color comparisons probably not super fair, but it still looks fantastic. And bringing in Wingspan, it's the same exact size between the two of them as Wingspan was with Pounce, but again, you can see the difference in the coloration there. And then we bring in our Deluxe, and this, I'm actually going to raise the camera up a bit more so that we can move things back, so that we can see them all kind of together-ish. Okay, you go over here. I did not think this through very well. So you can see them all together, and this is why I was saying to keep in mind the sizes in robot mode, because looking at these vehicle modes together, there's a pretty distinct size difference. Like, Downshift looks massive next to Pounce. Looks absolutely massive, and Wingspan is a little bit bulkier just because of the molding, but if you don't look at the wings, you just look at the shape of the body of the vehicle, they look tiny compared to Downshift. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it's a really impressive thing, because again, remember, they look like this. They're kind of on the small side compared to regular Deluxe, but when you transform them, there's like practically no kibble on them, and they're the same height. It's amazing just how much compacts down into these vehicle modes. And I said as much with the Prime Viacon when I was talking about him. At least I'm pretty sure I did. It was a while ago since I recorded that video. But I love this mold for that. I love the way that the entire top section of the car rolls up into the legs, and it's such a great design, but I also really love how deceptively tiny, no loosely based pun intended, but I like how deceptively tiny these vehicles are compared to their robot modes. It's really cool. And lastly, just because, let's move them around here a little bit so we can kind of get everyone lined up. There you can see Pounce and Wingspan with the duck tank. And that is going to do it. I don't necessarily have I don't have an affinity for Botcon toys in a general sense. Like, I think some of them are cool, but it's these two in particular that I really wanted to get my hands on, and I just so happened to luck out and find the pair of them listed without their weapons or accessories or anything like that for a very reasonable price, I feel like. It was basically only slightly higher than if I bought each one at retail off a peg, like if they were just a standard deluxe release. So I think that's pretty good. With that in mind, I definitely think that it's totally worth it, but I'm also a sucker for this color scheme and also a sucker for this mold. So, your mileage may vary. But I cannot get over how great this looks. These colors are fantastic. But that's enough of my rambling about Pounce and Wingspan, or the Dread Pirate Crew, however you prefer to think about them. What do you all think? Are you just not enough of a fan of the mold to bother wanting to get these guys? Is it something that you would have preferred they be cheaper so that you could army build with? Because I think that was the intention, but definitely not for the prices these guys are going for. Are you a fan or not a fan of the color scheme? Because it is definitely very, very 90s Trapper Keeper. Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all, and while you're at it, also feel free to like, subscribe, or if you're feeling generous, you could buy me a coffee. Any of those things would make me a happy Rob, and remember, art is more than meets the eye.